South America, a continent of extremes, home to hundreds of millions of people and animal species, this is a land of astonishing diversity. At its heart lies the Amazon, the world's largest rainforest, the lungs of our planet. This part of the world faces enormous political, economic, and ecological challenges today. With government approval across the continent, oil rigs drill deeper into land that has sustained indigenous peoples for thousands of years. Almost 20% of the rainforest has already been lost, a loss of nature that continues every minute. The consequences affect us all. Droughts, floods, the collapse of biodiversity, and climate breakdown. The people who live in South America are severely affected. They are losing their homes and their cultures, and that is why they are offering the most determined resistance today. Sometimes they risk their lives. Meanwhile, democracy itself is under pressure worldwide. Around the world, institutions falter, leaders delay, and climate action gets pushed aside for other priorities. But in Brazil, Ecuador, and Chile, communities are refusing to wait. People are not asking for change, they are demanding it, creating it, fighting for it. Through direct democracy and participatory action, they are confronting governments, corporations, and the systems designed to silence them. They prove that democratic tools work and that change is possible. And they remind us to encourage people everywhere to take action.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Link, you have the floor.
Yeah.
You ready?
I'm ready.
For a strong democracy and the protection of our planet. 4 activists, 3 projects, 1 shared vision to strengthen South America from within, with courage, commitment, and the power of collaboration.
My name is Josefina. I have been an activist since I have like 20 years old. And I have been like always working in some part of my labor works in volunteering in climate justice and environmental justice.
I am Marcela. I have a master's degree in public administration in citizens' participation and field. I work as a coordinator in the Libera Brazil, which is an organization, a non-profit and a non-partisan organization founded in 2017 with the aim of deepening and strengthening democracy through deliberation processes.
Well, my name is Alejandra Santillana Ortiz. I have been part of the Unidos collective for 3 years. Unidos is an horizontal collective where much of the work is rotating, like spoken persons and strategic debates, participation in space, like everything like that.
I'm David Fajardo Torres. I'm a lawyer, and as a member of the Unidos collective, I work in the legal team.
Alongside the stories of Josefina, Marcela, Alejandra, and David, Clara Egger, expert in direct and participatory democracy, will guide us through the ways all of us can contribute more actively to the politics that affect our everyday lives.
So let's maybe start with defining what democracy is about, right? So democracy is basically about the set of rights we enjoy as citizens, right? So we have the right to form an association, to discuss our political ideas, to show our opinions also in the street by demonstrating, to think whatever we like about how politics should be done. And direct democracy is the idea that we give to people a new right, which is to write directly the law and vote it directly. So you may see it as somehow a new right that is given to people in a context where in different systems people enjoy different type of political rights.
First, we travel to Chile, where activists of the NGO Acción Climática have worked to fulfill the 2018 Escazú Agreement, which is a landmark treaty on climate justice for Latin America and the Caribbean. They focus on environmental democracy by working to guarantee rights to information, public participation, and justice when it comes to the environment, while also protecting environmental human rights defenders. Josefina will tell us her story of making climate laws more accessible to the citizens of Chile and Latin America.
Nowadays, we're working in different areas like an advocacy in civic space, but we are also working in environmental democracy. When we talk about Escazú Agreement and citizenship participating in democracy spaces, we need to have in the first step like information. If we don't have information, everything that goes further doesn't have like the solid or the deepness that we need to make really some change in the things that are happening. So we need to put like some way on our governments to look forward to take action in environmental issues, also complementing this with the Escazú Agreement and the international law standards. We have this idea that there was a great gap between the information and the discourse. I mean, we were talking the other day about how words like sustainability or climate change is like some words that you can put everything on it, and greenwashing is like on the next door. Nowadays, we are like making a project that looks forward to give information to people that is called Climate Action, precisely because there's a lot of our countries that address like a climate actions law, or climate change law, but there are like a lot of things that are compromised there, and we don't know if the governments are going forward or not. So we put on a platform, a technological platform, where we are monitoring how the government is going further in this law. And this is a really beautiful project because we could alliance with a scientific center that could give us methodology to go further in this and to talk. And on the other hand, we work with two ONGs that work in things of environmental, so that they also check out what we were delivering. So we have like a lot of security about what we are addressing in the public space. Because that is also really relevant nowadays in the democracy debate. So we were really like picky with that kind of things.
So in a democracy, the ideal, right, is that legislation is passed on the name of all of us. So the government should be able to also explain what it is doing on behalf of all of us. Something that is very important to also make sure that a government is accountable for its action is to be able to know what are the type of action that a government is taking. And it looks evident, right? We tend to think, okay, then this law are public, right? Because they are made on the name of like all of us. But it's not that easy. I can give you the example of one project I'm currently doing. So I'm trying to get all the legislation that has been passed by a government about the check and balances, right? The relationship between the parliament and the government. And this information is crazily difficult to access. It's out there, it's public, but you may not know how to find it, right? So it's difficult to search, difficult to also access, and the language often is also quite complicated to understand. So that's why transparency is so important, is that also people are able to know what their government is doing and what it is not doing on a specific situation. So transparency is very important, because the very idea of democracy, right, people making decisions, is based on the idea that you have the right information, right, to make good decisions. And transparency is about providing people with the relevant information. But there is a dilemma here, right, because often in democratic systems, many decisions are hidden, right? There are information that we don't get. So that's why it's very important that us as citizens, we require more information about how decisions are made, what are the factors that influenced a specific decision, because we may not know, right? We have also a life to live, and it's difficult to get access to this information. So usually when people, they want to change their system, the first thing they want to get is a notion of where is the information, right? How a specific decision has been made? Who are the people who were invited to discuss that decision? And that's why transparency is so, so important. It provides people with information, and it makes also our representative accountable for their decision.
We hear about our governments talking about action, about climate action, about how they're addressing, but when we go and make like some evaluation of this, we are like late, like the 30% of the normative of the law aren't here, so we can implement the law, and we are already late like 2 years. And this is like a thing that goes further in society, because also we are talking in this law of subnational plans of climate change, and if the central part is late, all the subnational part is also late. So it has also like some impact in the territory, along all territory in Chile. So we think that giving this kind of tool is like the first step to give like a participation with the capabilities that can deliver or address some advocacy with a good scope, an advocacy that is looking further where the government is in stay. I mean, it's not like doing anything. And because we already know that ONGs is a really little space in society. So we need that the society have the tools, not only the people that is really like working towards things of democracy or any other thing. We need that everyone give some accountability. That is really relevant, because when we talk about climate crisis or biodiversity falling, is a lot of risk for a lot of people, and is annoying like to see that this is like coming and no one is doing anything. When you look like the research about the sense of climate issues, you always see that the citizenship is like 80% worry and 7% worry, but they really don't know how they can like demand this kind of things. So if you look like the narrative that was on press before of this project, it was everything talking about the good and the advance that it means to have a climate change law. And it was really amazing, I mean, to see that after we took this to the public sphere and make like a communication plan around it, like how nowadays there is not only us talking about how we are late about taking action, is also a lot of another ONGs talking about, and in different areas. So I think that this like changed the narrative where the citizenship look where we were, I mean, in action.
So digital platforms have a lot of assets, right? Especially that they allow to provide the information directly. You can also store a lot of information. You can organize in a sort of a user-friendly manner. Then people can have access to it on their phone, on like anything they have, a tablet, computer. But the side effect is that in places where access to internet is not the same for everyone, where some places they have no electricity, they have power cuts, or internet is not provided to the people, then it is also something that can exclude people from the information. So I would say it's a fantastic tool, but it has to be adapted to the local context, because the aim, after all, is to make sure that people do have access to the information.
At the gateway to the Amazon rainforest in northern Brazil, activists have been tirelessly working to include the voices of local citizens and empower them to contribute to environmental policy in their communities. Marcela, as part of the NGO Delibera Brazil, has helped organize citizens' assemblies that allow all members of the community, from farmers to indigenous peoples, to have their voices heard.
Regarding Bujaru's background, it is a city really next to Berlin, which is the capital of Pará state in the north of Brazil. Bujaru has 20,000 inhabitants in the city, and almost 70% of them lives in the rural area of Bujaru. we realized that Bujaru is a big producer of açaí. It is like the fourth most producer of açaí in Brazil. In one hand, there's a lot of açaí plantations, and they do it in a really ecosystem and cooperation system of plantation. So to grow one açaí, you need banana, you need cocoa, you need cupuaçu. So it's a complex system that makes the açaí possible over there, and it's really beautiful to see how the riverside communities and traditional communities, they care about their production, and they care about making their production more varied that they can. So this is something that we can see there. We were surprised because even if they had so much açaí plantations, they don't have the infrastructure there to process the açaí. So the açaí goes off of the city really easily and doesn't bring tax revenues for the municipality. So they are ninth more dependent of the federal money. So in one hand, they have like this powerful plantation system of açaí, and in the other hand, they have this dependency of federal government. And this kind of dilemma is really common in Amazon region. It is a dilemma that we found in Bujaru, but we can say that small cities and medium cities in Amazon region, they struggle with really similar dilemmas, which is preservation and how to grow in an ecosystem, in a small ecosystem way, against how can we develop the city, how can we develop and produce tax revenues and produce money for the municipality and for the cooperatives. So it's like a dilemma, development versus preservation, which is really common in, I would say, 15% of the municipalities in the Amazon region. So this was the case of Bujaru Citizen Assembly.
So citizen assemblies are more and more used in different political systems. So they are a tool of participatory democracy, right? They are a tool that allows citizens to participate to the decision making, but not decide directly. Let's imagine something very simple, right? We want to reduce the use of car in a specific city, right? There are many, many ways of doing that. There are many ideas about it. Shall we make more parking spaces outside of the city? What will be the impact on small shops, right? People whose livelihood depend on actually citizens accessing their shops. All of these questions are really good questions for a citizen assembly. A citizen assembly can help map out what are the stakes on a specific question and have an informed decision about it before, for example, taking a decision. A citizen assembly is quite simple to explain. So the idea first is that you have to set up your assembly, right? And ideally what you want is that it is really representative of the diversity of people living in a specific place, a city, a community, right? So most of the time what you do is that you select people by lot. But what you have to be very careful about is to make sure that even the people who are very far away from decision making because they work full time, because they are single parents, because they have to take care of an elderly home, they are also represented, right? So it's also, you have to select them by lot, but making sure that these different, social groups are also well represented. That's the first aspect, crucial aspect, the recruitment. Then the assembly is set up, right? So people are there, they form this assembly, right, of different people, and then they need to receive information from different sources. So usually what you do is that you invite experts from different type of groups, right? Experts may not necessarily be people like me, right, working at the university. It could be people working in civil society organizations, lawyers who could explain, for example, what are the regulations about traffic in different places of the world, policymakers from the city who will tell you how they discussed that topic in the past. So you have that really long moment of people listening to advice and also deliberating with each other, right? So it's a sort of a moment where you get information, but you also discuss it, right, together, and you weight this different form of information. And then you come up with a sort of, it's not really a decision, right, but a formalization of what you would like to see as a group, as a citizen assembly. And usually it takes the form of a report, some suggestion for action that you hand in to politicians so that they can make also their own decision on the topic. So in a nutshell, that's also really how it works.
Citizen assemblies is a methodology in which citizens are randomly selected and they debate and deliberate about complex problems in the politics. So mainly we have three main steps. The first one, that we recruit, sort some citizens in a region, a city or a state or a national level. And after these citizens, they go through an informative stage. So we organize some sessions and the citizens, they have the opportunity to learn and to debate with specialists, some scholars and some community leaders and some people involved in the problem. And after, as the third stage, we deliberate. So it means talking and it means like finding a consensus. So we did three types of recruitment. The first one was sending letters for who were in the urban area. The second one was recruitment in point of flow in the municipality, as in the hospital, in the schools, and in bus stations. We had some recruiters over there asking people to register to the citizen assembly. And our third strategy was going directly to the traditional communities. This was really important in Bujaru case because the traditional community, they didn't trust the government processes. And we find out that the recruitment process, like randomly selected citizens, wasn't a good idea for them because they have a different approach of deciding and debating some politics inside of their communities. But the important decisions are made by the leaders. So this is something really curious because we were like the methodology of citizen assembly created in Europe and doing here in Europe. They randomly selected people, believing that all the citizens have the capacity, as they want to protect their lands and their rights, and all, in their opinion, only the members of the association can fight for their rights properly.
We are here in Brussels, right? So far away from Latin America, but a city that has a long experience, right, on citizen assembly, and something that has always been extremely challenging is to recruit people. To make sure not only that you have enough people to set up your assembly, but also that people who may not feel like they have something to contribute do come. So that's a super challenging process. There are different ways of addressing it, but most of the time the success of the failure or your assembly will depend on how well you're able to recruit a really diverse set of people.
We turn to Ecuador. Activists Alejandra and David are part of the Yasunidos Collective, which is an alliance of indigenous, environmental, and human rights organizations and activists. They have fought and continue to fight for the protection of the ecosystem and indigenous communities of the Yasuni National Park from oil exploration and exploitation.
First of all, Yasuni, like I was saying, is located in a north part of the Amazon area in Ecuador. And the 43 block is very important because it is the home of the isolated indigenous people, such as Tagaeris and Taromenanes. And it's very important because of we call it the heart of Yasuni Park. It was a privileged place during the Ice Age because it didn't freeze, and that allows it to be today a place with the highest concentration of biodiversity in the world per square meter. We have destroyed part of the Amazon territories. The people which are living in Amazon territories in Ecuador are still being poor. So what happened with oil? That was the first question for us. But despite this and the official narrative of the oil lobby that always tell us that the only way out of poverty is to extract oil or now minerals, we managed to win the consultation.
Principally, we have the Ecuadorian government and its public oil company called Petroecuador, and obviously it's very close relation with the entire oil sector that want to maintain and deepen the exploration of crude oil in spite of biodiversity and the native Amazonian peoples, especially the uncontacted people. Basically, the popular consultation was the only option that we have to stop the oil extraction into the Yasuní National Park. The referendum or popular consultation is a mechanism of direct democracy that allows the Ecuadorian people, the voters principally, to be part of the political administrative decision-making process of the country. And it's very important because the decisions made by means of a referendum are binding, so it's of obligatory and immediate compliance for everyone in Ecuador and obviously for the government also. Faced with this, the best way to prevent the exploitation from happening was to allow the Ecuadorian people themselves to make the decision on whether or not exploit the oil into the Yasuní National Park. Of course, we were confident that the people would not allow it.
So in different systems, people use different terms to refer to the same things, and that's something important because each democratic system, even if the tools are similar, they have their own way, right, of referring to a situation. In some countries, you speak about popular votes, a popular initiative, and in other places, especially in Latin America, you speak about public consultation. But these are the same, right? The idea is just that you want people to tell elected officials what they think on a topic in a vote. We call it referendum, in other places it's a public consultation, yet in another place it would be a vote, but these are the same thing. So it's the most difficult maybe part in a referendum is to look at who is actually making the decision to call for a referendum. Most of the examples we know, especially here in Europe, are what we call top-down referendum, right? Where the government is asking a question to citizens, right? And most of the time it's very important. It's a question, right? It's not about a policy, it's really about do you want to stay in the EU or not, as in the case of Brexit? Do you want more immigration or less, as a referendum who took place in Hungary, for example? This form of top-down referendum are not ideal for democracy. What are the referendums that are much more important are the one who allow citizens to directly ask their fellow citizens to vote on a policy topic. So that's an important part, right? Because citizens, they don't come to their fellow citizens with a question, they come with a law proposal. So first step, they have to write this law proposal. So most of the time, this is complicated. So what you do is that you go to associations, lawyers, also to public authorities who can help you draft this law proposal. And then before it gets submitted to a vote of your fellow citizen, to a referendum, you have to ensure that, of course, your proposal is supported by a sufficiently large number of people. Why? Because let's imagine, right? If each of us, we could write our law proposal and submit it to a referendum, we would have like so many referendums and it would be very time confusing. Also confusing in itself, right? We would vote on very close topics. So the idea of the citizen initiated referendum is that you decide of a number of signatures where you feel the issue is important enough for a minority of people to trigger directly a vote on this topic. So sometimes it's a percentage, right? You have to get the support of 2%, 5% of the population, and sometimes it's just a number. So you have to have the support of, I don't know, like 100,000 people, right? It depends on how your system is set up. It's very important to keep it accessible, right? So that the proposal is supported, but that the number of signatures is not too big. In the country I come from, France, it's 4 million. That's much too much, right? It's nearly impossible for citizens to get that number. Once you have enough signatures, starts the campaigning process, right? So there are people, especially in public authorities, checking the validity of your signature, whether they are valid or not. And then they put the issue to a vote sometimes 6 months, 8 months after the end of the signature collection period. So people start deliberating, talking, media will talk about the issues, the government will also issue its opinion, the people who launch the referendum will record videos to explain why they really support this initiative. And then after that period of debate, the vote is taking place. And it's a yes-no answer, right? You either take this proposal as it is or you leave it out as it is. So once a proposal has been declared valid, right, that it can be put to the ballot, usually it's the government who is in charge of organizing the referendum. Sometimes in some countries the government is forced to do that before a specific time period, right? So the government has 6 months, 8 months to have the referendum so that it doesn't, the proposal can't drag on forever, right? In other cases, it's organized during the elections because, of course, a referendum is costly, right? You vote during a referendum in the very same way that you vote for election, right? So it costs also a bit of money to print the ballot. So usually in a lot of countries, especially, for example, in Uruguay, what you do is that you couple the referendum with the elections so that people vote not only on electing their representative, but also on the proposal that is put forward by the people. So something very important to remember is that each of these steps they matter. In the research I do, for example, I compare how these steps are organized in different countries, right? And when they are too difficult to meet these conditions, they kill a bit the enthusiasm of the people. So think about, for example, the number of signatures you have to collect, such as in Ecuador, 5%. If you have a very populous country, then it's very hard to get to this 5%. Other criteria make it, for example, even more difficult. In the Philippines, you have to collect the signature from different islands of the country. It's a massive country, so not a single referendum has taken place in the Philippines because of that.
In total, signatures corresponding to 5% of the population are needed, and this must be validated by the National Electoral Council. Although it sounds simple, the truth is that both processes are complex and need to be fulfilled in a very rigorous manner so we can achieve to have the popular consultation.
So we decided to call, the organizations and also CONAIE, that is very important for us, and because there are indigenous people and pueblos indígenas that are living in Amazon area, so they are fighting for the defense of territories, like all of their life. There is no doubt Yasuni is a symbol of care and defense of human and not human life, as we used to say, in the midst of the multidimensional crisis we face in the world. So for us was great because we can put this, like this message, sí al Yasuni, sí a la vida, like yes to the life, yes to Yasuni, and that is very important in a country like this. Like Ecuador, that death and violence is kind of a part of daily lives.
Of course, each of the tools we talk about, they have a purpose, right? So you want to use citizen assembly if you want people to deliberate, right? To get information. But if you want people to decide, it's much better to go for a citizen-initiated referendum or a referendum, right? If you want people to have more information, transparency is important as a first step. So something that is very important is not to think that one tool will solve all the problems of our democratic system. Something that is pretty sure is that each of the tools that were presented are actually key to make our democratic system work better. So they are very important in and of themselves, right? And they allow our system to work much better and to deliver also on their promises to actually the people. If I can maybe discuss one or two challenges. So the first challenge when it comes to transparency is that sometimes research has shown that when you make decisions very transparent, then it harms a bit the compromise, right? And follow me here, it's very easy to understand, right? If you make, for example, the negotiation between a government and unions very transparent, out there, open in the public, then each politician will have an interest in taking a very hard stance, right? Because you want to show to the people who elected you that you're not ready to compromise. And that can be a problem, because sometimes you need to also make a step in the direction of someone else. So transparency is super important, but it can have also this side effect. So maybe not for everything. Citizen assembly, again, very nice, especially if you have the possibility then to launch a referendum just to clarify your idea, right? Understand the different positions, deliberate on a topic, get first views on it. What we have observed, however, is that most of the time it's always the same people participating in this citizen assembly. So people who are very poor, living very far away, such as the indigenous community, who are hard to reach, have also other issues in mind, they are often the one who drop out. So if you want really a tool that allows older people to make decisions, you need to think about this issue very, very carefully, because everywhere it's very difficult to mobilize people, especially if in the end the decision is given to elected officials. Neither you nor I would take a lot of time discussing on a topic if we could not decide on it afterwards. The challenge for citizen initiative referendum is that many people want it, but elected officials, they have an issue with giving up power, right? It's a tool that is very powerful, because basically a power that was in the hand of elected officials, politicians, then is given to the people. So it's a hard fight, it's a long fight, and sometimes it's really hard to see that you face a lot of obstacles in your discussion, because politicians are also not so ready to give up their power. But it's a fight that is really worth to continue and to do together. There are many people in the world really wishing to have more decision-making power, wishing to change the democratic system, and we are stronger together. We can do that together, learning from each other, learning from our experiences, and making sure that we don't get exhausted fighting for our democracy.
What unites these stories, from Chile to Brazil to Ecuador, is not geography, but participation. These activists, Josefina, Marcela, Alejandra, and David, didn't wait for permission. They didn't wait for perfect institutions. They organized, they mobilized, and they used the tools of democracy, participation, deliberation, collective decision-making, to protect land, water, and future generations.
Somehow, after our two constitutional process in Chile, it's really difficult to make people take action in anything. It's like somehow they're really bored of things that don't get anywhere. I really think that the process get us to a place, but that's not the feeling, like the national feeling. Even though I see and I saw, as I told you, that there is a change of the narrative, in the public narrative. I mean, the press is not addressing now this only as a good advance. It's also addressing that there is something that is not had been done. And I think that I like to settle some truth about it. I mean, I think that is important. For us, for Ciudadanía Inteligente was some kind of one of the first projects that we made in environmental democracy. And I think that put us in the civil society in a place where we can talk about probably not the things that are everyone talking in the environmental ONGs, but to talk about the issues of democracy with environment. And things like the information and participation is like two kind of things that are really important. All the conflicts here has to be with environmental issues. If you look like what happened with human defenders in the world, all the things that are threatened here in Latin America is related with environmental. So I think that is like a door open for us to start working and to start delivering the things that we really know about working with local people and how to address like plans of participation and good participation in this new area of environment.
At the end, I stayed there for 7 weeks because I had to make the bridge. And we realized that it wasn't easy to put the civil society and traditional communities and the government in the same table. It's like a place that historically they struggle doing that, and they are fighting for centuries for the land, for the fruits production, and for some rights, basic rights. When you see these leaders and what they think, what they are claiming for, is the same thing that the Secretary of Agriculture is claiming for, but there's a tension, there's a tension that can't make them to see they are claiming for the same stuff. So the Citizen Assembly is good because we can't decrease this power and this tension between everybody and between the groups. And they realize they are not enemies. Talking about the recommendation, the third recommendation was about the preservation of the forest. The question is here, it's how to make the preservation possible and affordable. Yeah, they say they are daughters and sons of the forest. So they are committed with the forest. They see the forest as their family. So they need the right tools and the economic tools to preserve it. I think one of the challenges, was to make possible for everyone to get the sessions. So as we have rural communities and traditional communities, and the buses, they don't run on Saturdays and in the time that the sessions were taking place. So we had to provide cars and buses and vans for everyone. We had some problems with the rain, and when rains in the rainforest is something really serious. So it was incredible how the citizens were committed. Like they were committed to commute for 2 hours in the rain in the middle of the Amazon to get there and to spend 5-6 hours.
So the campaign was a lot of videos and like interventions in neighbors with murals, like paintings, and also the people were in the public transport, like the buses, like talking about Yasuni. They were using a lot of tools from the theater, the arts, and have people who decided to make songs, and we have also panels and interviews in the demonic, like the mainstream media. We did a lot of campaign in a lot of territories. Our strength was the strength of the organizations that decided to be, because of this calling for Yasuni. So the campaign was great. I think the campaign was, for me, one of the most greatest, experience in my life. Yeah, because it's very hard to be here in Ecuador. Yeah, we have the power is off. We don't have employee here. The hope is so hard for us to keep. This was I don't know how to say. In Ecuador, we have this long, experience of levantamientos indígenas, and all these how do you say, levantamientos, I don't know how they say, like a rising, like this indigenous movement. They call us, and in Ecuador, to let's keep it, and then struggle, and then rise up, and then we have to defend and struggle because all the rights are, violated by the rich people here. We used to be a country that talk a lot about, hope, democracy. So what happened in the last 5 years was so horrible here that it's very difficult for us to keep, the hope in our hearts, in our struggles, because nothing works, nothing works. And so the campaign for Yasuni was kind of a mechanism that, give us hope. And it was a collective hope,
So with my colleague Raoul Maniberton and the team of Democracy International, something we had at heart is to publish once a year an easy to access report that tells about what were the key votes that were held, where are people voting on which issues, and what are the different tools of direct democracy across the world. And this report now exists since 1 year. It's called the Global State of Direct Democracy, and each year we have a specific focus. So for the next edition, it's going to be on local direct democracy. And something I can tell you upfront is that the topic where people vote the most on, where they are the most interested in, are not the one we see necessarily in the media. So climate, for example, and the environment at large is one of the key topics where people mobilized everywhere in the world. So if you want to also get a sense, know more about these different votes, what are people putting forward, how we can learn from such initiatives, the report is a good place to start, because it's really a sort of journey into the many different worlds of direct democracy, and that can also really inform your practice and your fight home.
I think that is something important for us. Well, I think that probably that is the path that we need to construct, to get for another place. We have, as Latin Americas, a really extractive development in the economic part, and that extractivism has lived with a lot of strength towards the reality of citizenship. We need in societies that are really unequal, with a lot of people that don't have access to things that we consider basics for delivering human rights. If we don't go further in having the tools needed for participatory democracy, we are going yes or yes to the other path, to authoritarianism. And I really think that is the worst place where we can go when we have a society that is really threatened by big issues in society. And the only way where people can feel some safeguard or some way without risk or protected by their authorities is with the participation of them. This is when we think in a subjective way. When I need something, I need that the other person hear what I need. And if the other person took a place and do an act without asking me, probably I will think that was more an aggression than something to help me. And this can be amplified in society. So I think that is the main importance.
The Libera wants to position the citizens also in the front line of the recommendations and front line of the following and advocacy efforts. The Bujaru Citizens Assembly is part of a broader project called Resurgentes, which is 200 randomly selected citizens in Latin America who's going to deliberate about climate change. So our project is made by organizations in Brazil, Mexico, Argentina, and Colombia, and the four countries and five organizations We are working together to make a collective response to tackle climate change in Latin America, but from Latin America to the world, and with our voices in the first place.
Finalize, I think the citizens' assemblies and climate assemblies, they have this power to strengthen democracy and to strengthen climate change policies. We believe that citizen assemblies, they are really good, but alone they cannot do much, because we see that democracy is about an ecosystem. We cannot put our effort in only one institution, only one way to do something. So we have citizen assembly, we have government institutions, we have the electoral process, we have different types of being a citizen, of engage yourself in something that you believe. So the citizens' assemblies, they are one of these tools, and they are part of a good and big ecosystem of democratic innovations that can deepen and strengthen democracy.
And it's necessary that this exercise of direct democracy becomes more and more common, less bureaucratic and more accessible in order to move from representative democracy to a true, direct, and popular democracy. And that is what we are trying to achieve with the fight of the Yasuni by the way of the popular consultation. For us, is understand also as a mechanism to defend the nature rights beyond the judicial processes. And it's important because it allows us to empower the people, to let them know that they have the power to make a decision that we used to believe that only belongs to the government and to the people with power.
I think it is very important for us to, to look at this initiative like something that is very like important, that we can do it, and this is a sign that we can do it. You can have this popular point of view, like massive majority that decide to keep oil in the ground in a country that is made by oil, but because the last 50 years Ecuador was an oil country. So I think it is a very powerful sign to the people. Yeah, I think one of the things that we can share to the world is that we can have a democratic, massive, popular tool with people, with organization, to have a practical, real, and possible strategy to keep, the life territories in the world. And to do that, we need to discuss about development, model in our countries that is a herencia colonial, and all of our role in the international division of labor. And also we can do this because we want to save Earth, and we have to do this against the accumulation dynamic that the capitalism always are offering us, So I think it's very powerful, and it's very clear that in the global south we can have strategies for the rest of the world. And because we have this colonialism and all of this economy that depends to oil, we can't do a lot of things with indigenous movement, with people, with the working class, and never against them or behind them or something like that. It's a kind of a path with people, with the organized popular camp for me. Yeah.
Democracy does not promise easy answers. It asks for time, for patience, for courage. It asks people to listen to one another despite differences, and to stay engaged when outcomes are uncertain. When people come together to shape the decisions that affect their lives, democracy becomes more than a system. It becomes a force capable of protecting our planet and redefining our future.
Come on, man.